ceremonial grade cacao. What is it? And we are interviewing Rebekah from Ritual Cacao. So I'm going to call them up here. We're talking about farming practices specifically today. What we've already covered is sacred reciprocity and the process of actual farming practices. And what makes something ceremonial grade cacao as opposed to just other cacao. Alrighty, we have accepting Laura here. Just going to take a few moments to get us all onto the live. So I've just got my WhatsApp in front of me so I can get them both on. We're all struggling a bit today. Hello, hello everybody coming in from wherever you are coming in from. I'm going to request again and then perhaps Rebekah and Laura, you could also just request to join one more time. Ceremonial. There we go. Hello, hello Laura, hello. There we go. I see Rebekah is here, but we're just trying to get her on.
Wonderful. I'm just going to change direction because the light is a bit
all right, you do that. So you do that in the meantime. Rebekah, if you could just request to join. I don't know why it's not there. There we go.
Hi guys.
Yeah. And now Laura's disappeared.
Finally got to connect.
So happy to have you. So happy to have you with us today while Laura switches herself around. There we go. Just to announce to all of our viewers, whether you're joining live or whether you're getting the recording, please pop in any questions into the comment boxes. And we are on part 4 now of our conversation series around ceremonial grade cacao. What is it? And we've looked at sacred reciprocity and harmony, as well as the processing of the beans into paste. And we skipped out a portion because we wanted to chat to Rebekah about it. So today we are looking at farming practices. So I'm Fran, I'm founder of Cape Cacao. I'm going to hand over to Laura to do a quick introduction and then hand over to Rebekah as well to introduce herself before we start the discussion on farming practices. So Laura, over to you.
Thank you, Fran. Hi, it's lovely to be on here again. So for those of you that know us, Fran and me can enter a conversation and literally talk for days. And believe me, Rebekah is going to be our kind. So we're going to, instead of like each, talk a lot because there's so much to say, we're also passionate about cacao. Today we have specific questions that we ask Rebekah, give her a voice, and she's coming in from Ritual Cacao. And in the UK where I am based as well, I'm originally from Germany though, so for those of you picking up on my funny accent, it's a mix mash between South German, Icelandic, Essex, and maybe a sprinkle of Glastonbury magic here and there because it's brilliant. Hello, Rebekah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for inviting me onto your discussion today. I'm CEO and founder of Ritual Cacao. I've been working with cacao since 2013, but I came across it in 2012. In fact, I was called to cacao through ayahuasca. I did an ayahuasca ceremony while I was bumbling around, having gone bankrupt and unsure what my next mission was. And it was the ayahuasca that told me to find cacao and bring her back and start serving her as a sacred plant medicine, which made loads of sense because I'd been working with ayahuasca for many years and with cannabis for many years. And so cacao seemed like the obvious next step. And I'd been looking for cacao ceremonies in the UK prior to that, but I couldn't find any. So I came back with 21 pounds of cacao in my rucksack, and it sat for about 2 weeks gathering dust. And then the cacao kind of said, what are you doing? Are you just going to leave me in the corner in your rucksack? Like, there's a lot of me here. And I was like, I don't know what to do. And I just got this feeling, cook me up and hear what I've got to say, listen to me. And so I cooked up, and she basically said, you have to do a shamanic ceremony like you serve ayahuasca, in a way where you give me a space to speak, to connect with the person. I'm the goddess here. You're just my sidekick to serve me. And actually I do the work, which is very much like ayahuasca because no one messes with that plant. So I totally realized, and then I started delving deeper into the world of cacao, and really it was amazing what I what I learned, not only the historical history and story of cacao, but also how powerful she is on so many levels, both emotional, spiritual, mental, and obviously physical as well, and realize what an important medicine she is for the West. Especially when we're in this mental health crisis right now, she is a fantastic plant for human health and well-being, and I feel really blessed to have found her and to be part of the scene and the growing awareness of cacao. But it's very important that we keep the sacredness of her as a plant medicine. And I know this is one of the reasons why we've come together, is because as anything becomes popular, trendy, becomes a fad, it can lose this really the real essence and importance of this medicine, this plant, as a very important medicine. And we can't lose this incredible important aspect of it. And ceremonial grade cacao turns into a commodity, just like chocolate has. And it's really important that we educate people on the importance of recognizing cacao as a sacred plant and what that actually means. And what is the difference between ceremonial grade cacao and cheap commoditized cacao? Because just like artisan chocolate and your bog standard Mars bar or dairy milk, they're very, very different. And so is ceremonial grade cacao compared to cheap cacao. And it's really important now that as it becomes more mainstream, that we start really, really clarifying the difference between these two qualities, really, and also educating people on the importance of cacao as a plant medicine, and reinstating her as that plant medicine, and honoring the indigenous lineages and the indigenous people that have been growing cacao for all these years, and not losing them in the mix, which they have been in the commoditization of cacao as chocolate over the last 200-300 years.
Yeah. And so that's a perfect place for me just to get in for my first question. Thank you, Rebekah. So to remain in honor and reverence with the medicine with the plant as a medicine, we can look at origin of cacao. And traditionally, as we all know, for those who don't know, it's from Mesoamerica. And since travel was possible for humans, cacao has now started to grow across the entire equatorial belt, wherever there's a landmass. So my question to you is, because of where cacao grows now, does it matter location-wise if we're starting in Mesoamerica, in Africa, in some of the islands around the rest of the belt, Indonesia, for example? Does it matter where it grows if it ticks all the other boxes that make up ceremonial grade? Is origin important?
Personally, no, I don't think origin is important. I think it's important to know where it stems from, but then it's only just recently been unearthed that cacao originally comes from Ecuador, and that's been within the last year or so. It's really literally. So prior to that, everyone thought it came from Mexico and from the Mayans in Mexico. So actually, even the origin has changed over the years. So I think origin isn't important. I think there's other way more important aspects of ceremonial grade cacao, and if people are growing it in the right way, then it doesn't matter where it is. It's really how it's grown, and there's other more important aspects. But if someone's honoring the plant as a plant medicine, then I don't think it matters really the area of which, and it grows 20 degrees around the equator. It can only grow within the 20 degrees around the equator belt. If we just limited it to one area, there would not be enough cacao. As it grows, I mean, it should be accessible to as many people as possible because of its powerful medicinal properties. And I think if we just allowed, Ecuador and Peru to be the only countries that could claim origins of it, they just wouldn't be able to produce enough to be able to feed the people that really need it.
Thank you. Yes, I just recently published an article about why there can't be the one ceremonial grade cacao, because we all are in a different phase of our lives, and I just posed the question also to friend, or the imagination, like a thought experiment, so to say. If you think about, there's this one only specific sacred cacao grove. Imagine it was discovered somewhere in the ancient Ecuadorian forest, or in Guatemala, or whatever. And it's so important. It's been hidden from humanity until now. This is exactly what Rebekah said now. Would you want this sacred, pure medicine? There's only maybe like 20 trees to be coming out into the Western world and used by just, you know, the next businessman that just wants to give up coffee addiction. Of course not, right? So there's different entryways to cacao, and so many people ask me a lot about honoring the spirit, and I think exactly what you said, Rebekah, sums it really up. So nowadays, what we can do in a very un-woohoo way is honoring the spirit by remembering that we come from a colonizing background. So, and previous colonizers, right, they brought cacao here into our lands, but they didn't honor her. They abused her into chocolate. So now we can step forward and actually raise awareness about the whole food and about the healing properties of the plant. So, well, yeah, please go.
Well, it has always been a medicine. I mean, if you look at the historical uses of cacao, it was as a medicine, it was a currency, and it was only really became a confectionery when they realized that they could take out the cacao powder, the cacao butter, and turn it into a cacao powder. So once they were able to commoditize it and turn it into a cheap product that they could then commoditize and use, because cacao liqueur is not easy to use. It's very limited in its uses. So traditionally and in ancient ways, it was always a medicine, and I think that we need to bring her back as that medicine, because cacao comes into a culture when that culture is in crisis, and we're in crisis, certainly in the West, we're in crisis. And so I really feel cacao is having a comeback. All the plants are coming back to awaken our consciousness, and this is because we are in such dire crisis on the planet right now. Cacao is an essential plant to awaken us for that, and so she's almost expanding herself. And Michael Pollan did a very interesting talk about this, the biology of plants, and how, like, for example, corn wanted to become dominant, so it turned itself into a biofuel. I think cacao is ready to position herself on the stage as what I call a superfruit, to bring back some of that medicinal properties back, and take her out of where she's been hidden in as a confectionery.
Thank you. And if I may ask the next question, so as you said, for you it doesn't necessarily matter where cacao grows, as there's so much, and there is a certain equatorial belt that we talk about. So cacao already chose in a way anyway where she would want to be able to grow. However, as we still have problems, especially in Africa and other non-native cacao growing countries, what processes, farming techniques, harvesting, or ways to honor, right, the plant or its spirit or the biodiversity even, would need to be in place for you, in your opinion, Rebekah, for it to be classed as ceremonial grade cacao?
So for me, ceremonial grade cacao is ancient variety. So, first off, for me, it's ancient variety. If you're growing any GMO, that can't be ceremonial grade. Just the end of story. We're talking about ancient variety of plant, and also indigenous ancient variety of plant, of seed. That's I would say number one important. The second one is that it's wild harvested. It grows amongst other plants in the chakras, so you don't have these huge deforested land monocropped cacao trees. If it's grown in a monocropped way, it's as a commodity. It's not ceremonially grown. Ideally grown by the indigenous communities that live and have been working with cacao for hundreds of years. Something really, I think, quite important to honor the indigenous lineages of the people who are actually working with cacao and have been working with her for so many years, and that they get a fair price, that there is fairly traded, and that they can conserve and continue their traditional agricultural practices, because we're honoring those practices. No herbicides or pesticides. I mean, if you are spraying a shitload of chemicals all over your cacao, sorry, it's not just, can't be ceremonial grade. So you can't then have monocropped cacao trees, because the diseases are rampant. Tree diseases are rampant. So small chakras, small holdings with a cooperative of farmers, because cacao is a cooperative based crop. I mean, it works better in a cooperative where you get small holders all joining together to add their cacao into a processing plant. And then, of course, you have to also have an awareness of the soil. Like, are you respecting the trees? Is there a love for the cacao? If you've got a small holding and there's plastic everywhere and rubbish everywhere, then there's no respect for the plant. And again, it's lost its sacredity. So really, for me, ceremonial grade is the recognition of it as a plant medicine, and therefore treated as such. So I would say, for me, those are the main points to make it ceremonial grade. I'd be interested to know if you agree, or if there's anything you'd like to add to that.
Yeah, agree. I have a bit more of a fine-tuned question on this. Not two actually, but let me just see which one I want to ask first. So if we had to compare, so it's all very well saying this is what ceremonial grade cacao is, but there might be quite a few people who don't know the opposite of that. So could you speak to how it is different then for industrial use or commercial use?
So just very recently in May, I think it was May 20 or April 2023, the EU set out a regulation that you cannot deforest land for soya, cacao, and coffee, which means that commoditized cacao is deforesting land to grow monocropped cacao trees for selling cacao, just like you know grow animals for farm animals for food and not for animals, and not you're growing specifically to commoditize the cacao. So number one, that's definitely, that's not ceremonial grade. But the second is slave labor, child labor, the terrible practices that are going on in a lot of African cacao, where they're not being paid a proper wage, not at all. That the cacao companies or the chocolate companies have been in cahoots with the governments, have created a very low price for cacao, and the profits that these huge chocolate companies are making are insane, and yet the farmers don't get really any of those profits. They're squeezed, which means they have to go into slave labor, they have to go into child labor in very dangerous conditions, and therefore cannot be ceremonial grade. Also, there's a big push from governments, including the Peruvian government and the Ecuadorian government, which is where I get my cacao, for GMO. It's a cash crop. And GMO crops are much bigger. I mean, they produce much more. The trees are overladen with cacao pods, and they produce all year round. And the cacao doesn't have, it just doesn't have the same taste, the same anything about it, the same consciousness, the same energy that a ancient variety does that comes from Mother Earth. So again, very clear, GMO definitely can't be ceremonial grade, and you'll find a lot of these monocropped fields and plantations are predominantly GMO cropped. CCN 51 is the predominant GMO seed for cacao, and that is what's being pushed on a lot of farmers right now that want to go into cacao as a commodity. And the cacao consumption is rising, chocolate consumption is rising, and so what we're seeing is there's a big even bigger push for GMO, because GMO can't compete. Well, the ancient varieties of trees cannot compete with GMO trees. But again, if you're eating dairy milk, you're not going to know the difference between whether you're eating a GMO bar, because it's so full of fats and sugars and rubbish, basically. Whereas ceremonial grade hasn't got anything added to it. So you can really start telling the difference between if it comes from an ancient variety and if it comes from GMO.
Thank you. And talking about this ancient variety versus GMO, would you then, because it is really, we now nowadays know that it's very hard to differentiate like the varieties that we so far known as Criollo and Forastero and Trinitario, and now we know, well, actually cacao's cross-pollinating, and Criollo simply means native, so it's hard to really find this like one special ancient variety. However, there are of course native varieties from these lands, and then there's hybrids that especially us that started before GMO, where humans already wanted to create more harvest, and therefore it's easier to peel. It's more seeds per bean, etc., etc. So we've got quite clear distinctions. Right? No, you don't have the clear distinction. That's it. We do have some distinctions there, but not really clear. So would you say the ancient varieties is just everything that's non-GMO, or would you say there's still even a differentiation there?
No, I would say everything is a non-GMO, because we're so far down the line now that it's even hard to find non-GMO associations that aren't using non-GMO, and also non-GMO is also pollinating ancient varieties as well. There's a big problem with that, with pollination. So I think it would be almost impossible to say that only a specific ancient variety is ceremonial grade. I think it has to be a bit broader and say those, Criollo, Trinitario, and Fino di Aroma, which is the Ecuadorian one, and Fonatera, those ones are most definitely anything that comes from those four are ceremonial grade. Anything that's GMO isn't. And that makes it a much easier distinction. Otherwise, it's going to get really complicated.
Yes, agree. Thank you.
So far in summary, we're wanting to try and get an ancient strain or an ancient crop, and the conditions are really important on how they are grown. My question now is a little bit more technical. Is there a difference, and if there is, can you just explain it, between agroforestry and permaculture? So this idea of wild farming or wild harvesting, is there a difference there? Can you just speak to that?
Well, I would say that when you are permaculture, or you're using permaculture, you're working with the land. It's about keeping the land healthy, keeping the soils healthy, making sure you're not exhausting the soils, making sure that there's enough other species around so that biodiversity is flourishing in those areas, where you're not just got one crop that's sucking up all the nutrients, that isn't getting fed, that's limiting the amount of nutrients in the soil. So agroforestry, again, can be is it again what you mean by agroforestry, because these are all definitions, but for me agroforestry is when you grow large amounts of a crop, and again if they're not grown traditionally in a permaculture area alongside other trees and biodiversity, you are prone to disease, which means you're prone to using chemicals and fertilizers. You're prone to a lack of soil nutrients, so the pods aren't going to be healthy. Again, ceremonial grade is everything has to be healthy, has to be flourishing and vital, and everything has to really be abundant. And in order for soil to be abundant and full of nutrients, it can't be sucked up by one crop. And so agroforestry for me, okay, again, even with trees, for me, I don't feel comfortable about agroforestry. For me, I think we need to be moving way more into permaculture farming in order to sustain soils for future generations.
Longevity.
Yeah, longevity. I mean, it's all very well us saying, oh yeah, look, we've got cacao, but what about our children and our grandchildren? Are they going to be having is cacao going to be available to them? I mean, there's a big problem in Africa at the moment because of the lack of rain. So there's been a lack of rain. The monsoons didn't come, and so a lot of the crop in Africa is not growing, and it has really diminished. And so, price rises of cacao are going to go up quite dramatically from Africa, which means chocolate's going to go up. or if they don't put the price up to the consumer, then the farmer's going to suffer. And so this is a situation when you rely directly on nature, and ceremonial grade cacao relies directly on nature. You can't tamper with nature. There's no dominance of nature. We think we're doing dominance over nature, but the reality of it is we're not at all. So if the rains don't come, there's no cacao produced. Even in Ecuador this year, the cacao harvest was later than usual. It didn't start at the beginning of January when it should have done. It's starting later. We're already seeing how climate change is going to affect our crops. And when you work directly with nature, like we do with ceremonial grade cacao, you start seeing how crucial like the climate is to having healthy and nutritious and vibrant food.
Thank you.
So
that brings
I heard
sorry.
I just wanted to. You go, Laura.
We're going to the prices. Is that all right? Prices? Or should I bring that? Yeah. No. So we talked about prices are rising, or will rise, which also means when we talk about, and we've done this before, Fran and me, we talked about the processes involved in like traditionally processing cacao versus industrially, with the help of lots of machinery, etc., which is amazing to establish that the locals actually also get their fair share, because it's often done locally and through the hands of the indigenous cultures as well. So, but then obviously that means ceremonial grade cacao can't be cheap, and you've mentioned that before, Rebekah, right? There's already a certain standard, first of all in protection of nature, but also in protection of the reciprocity with the people on the land themselves. And we also want to raise the prices because we want, for example, in Africa, establish that finally, hopefully, there will be reward to the people as well. So that means, though, in general, the prices are going to go up and up, and people will try to find, let's say, creative solutions to avoid this. And one being, for example, just buying the beans and processing them with machines than in a Western country, for example. So is this something that you know, in the term of ceremonial grade cacao, is there another standard that you would like to see in it? Or do you say everything from like harvesting, like the growing and the harvesting of beans, that's important, and then processing can be done elsewhere because eventually we just otherwise it will be too expensive? Or is this actually exactly the change we need so that third world countries will finally also get a higher pay?
I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens next. Obviously, if you import the beans, it's much cheaper than if you import the actual liqueured cacao. And one of the big problems is that in Africa is that they don't manufacture the cacao. They just offer the beans. It's unprocessed. It's just the beans, and then the beans go to distribution centers, and that's what gets shipped. I think you're just going to have to manage. I mean, at the moment, we get everything done in Ecuador because it's easier, and also we want to. They have their own processing facilities, and we want to support them doing it, you know, in the country of origin. However, you know, if suddenly we find that it explodes and the price explodes, then we're going to have to look at other ways of doing it. Personally, though, it would mean manufacturing it here, which is pretty much just as expensive. I haven't looked into it, but for now, I think if you can protect the indigenous communities that are already doing it, then you're serving them in the short term. Who knows what's going to happen next? Who knows how it's going to be? I mean, already anyone that's importing knows the ridiculous issues that happen when you import a commodity from another country or anything from another country, especially now in England with Brexit. It's been quite challenging. So it's going to be interesting to see how, I mean, you know, there is no cacao anywhere in Europe that's being grown. So all cacao are reliant on cacao from, you know, the equator. So we're all in the same position and we're all in the same boat. If it's too cheap cacao, I just would not eat it. I just wouldn't buy it even. I mean, cheap means that somewhere down the line it hasn't been grown or harvested, or the people aren't getting a good price for it, or it's monocropped, or it's full of chemicals and pesticides and herbicides. It's inevitable. Ceremonial grade cacao, if done properly, is not a cheap product. It's an expensive product just by its very nature, and so it needs to be, because it's ceremonial grade. It's like ceremonial grade matcha. If it was too cheap, it wouldn't be sacred, and it wouldn't be honored as a medicine. So again, this is all about education, so people understand. If you want to get really pure ceremonial grade with the medicinal properties in it, that it contains all those medicinal properties, then you're going to be paying more than cheap book standard cacao. And I just want to say one other thing: just because someone blesses it and does a prayer over it and gongs over it does not make it ceremonial. That is just seriously spiritual bypassing right there. I'm so tired with all this spiritual, oh, look, I wafted some sage over it, it's now all high vibe. No, if you're not paying your farmers properly, if you're not treating the land properly, if you're growing GMO and you're using pesticides and herbicides, no matter how much you pray over it, it's still not going to be quality. Still not going to have the quality. So you might be able to raise it but you're not going to be able to take away the very elements that makes it ceremonial and makes it medicinal. So anyone that thinks that because someone is saying a nice lovely little prayer over it is raising the vibration of it is basically fooling themselves and buying into this toxic spirituality that, frankly, I think ceremonial grade cacao industry community really has to call out on this, because it is ridiculous that we can think that, oh yeah, we can bang a gong and then suddenly our vibrations are all high when it's GMO and full of chemicals and pesticides. I feel very strongly about that.
Ditto, and their hearts flying all over the screen as people on the live agree. Just for those who are getting a recording and get you a feel for it. I think what this is going to also need is a whole cultural mindset shift, because it's so ingrained in us to find the best price, to get the cheap deal, the sale here, we pick that up. So the education is so crucial to go. I mean, I still notice myself, I get the quality of certain things. I'm not talking about cacao now, but other things. I get that there's a quality and the price tag means that's like better and I want that. There's still this ingrained like little piece of financial shadow or like lack mentality of, oh no, as soon as there's a sale on or it's cheaper, I'd rather go for that. So there is this kind of inner awareness that, I think there's that piece as well, which is part of our spiritual, the work actually, rather than just bypassing. And of course, as soon as that price tag is too low, there's red flags for me. I'm like, either the farmers they're not getting what they should, or the quality is going down because at some point something's being cut. The corners are being cut to make that cheaper.
Because one thing that is really important for all cacao businesses that are claiming to be ceremonial grade is transparency. We need to be transparent. There should be nothing hidden about what anyone is doing. If you are ceremonial grade, then you show, then you can show how you're ceremonial grade cacao. If you're not ceremonial cacao, then it very easily can be seen that you're not ceremonial grade. What we need is more people to be more transparent, to show the people that aren't being transparent. Because if you can't prove any of those above points that I claimed about what is ceremonial grade cacao, then it isn't ceremonial grade. And it's about getting that educated and very clear, so that those that can't prove that can call it that, but they're obviously not ceremonial grade. And for me, that's really important, the transparency of that, which is why it is really important now that we're going to now flush out anyone that is calling their stuff ceremonial and it isn't ceremonial. And I've been really passionate about this for 11 years, and I'm passionate about it because I love the cacao spirit and the cacao plant, because I am dedicated to her and I honor her, and therefore I couldn't do it any other way. And anyone that is dedicated to the plant spirit, that sees her and re-positions her as a plant medicine, that has a love and a passion for her, wouldn't want to sell anything else, regardless of how difficult and challenging it is. We're doing it for the cacao's mission. And so for me, that's the most important thing as well, is recognizing that we're on a mission for cacao. I'm certainly on a mission for cacao to reinstate her. So I wouldn't cut corners. I'm not doing it as a commodity. My aim isn't to have everyone moving from coffee to cacao. My aim is for people who are really suffering mental health right now, feeling really depressed, really unhappy, don't have any serotonin. Instead of going on antidepressants, try cacao. Try cacao as a powerful step before you go into the antidepressant stage, because cacao is an amazing medicine for mental health and well-being, and not only that, but for physical health, because a lot of us are really nutrient deficient in selenium, in magnesium, in zinc, in copper, in antioxidants, and cacao provides all of those things. So it's an amazing booster. It's a superfruit. It's an absolute superfruit, and those that understand that ceremonial grade is getting the purest quality of what cacao can offer. It's not to say that, you know, your cheap cacao doesn't give you that, but it's not going to be at the health levels. And someone who's been taking it for 11 years, I've seen it. For me, I feel it stopped the aging process. My skin and hair are luscious. A lot of my physical well-being I put down to having consumed cacao over a regular period, but ceremonial grade. Yeah, because if you're drinking it over a period of time, you will start recognizing that it's going to have detrimental effect if it's cheap cacao, because if it's full of chemicals, full of herbicides and pesticides, and you're drinking that on a regular basis, at some point there's going to be an accumulation inside of all of that. So again, if you want to be drinking cacao on a regular basis, then go for the best. I mean, our problem is in the West is that we don't give enough respect to our mental health. We don't even honor our mental health. And if our mental health isn't balanced, nothing else is balanced. The planet is completely out of balance because our mental health is out of whack. And yet we don't like to spend money on our mental health. We'd rather spend money on lots of other things are more important than our mental health. We haven't been taught that the number one priority for every human being is to make sure we're well balanced. And so that's why people will say, oh, okay, but this is cheaper, so maybe I'll do this one, knowing that actually they would be better off taking something a bit more expensive and really honoring their mental health and well-being. But we don't honor ourselves. We'd rather buy the pair of shoes or the clothes, or there's other priorities that go way before making sure that our mental health is stabilized and balanced. And I think that is a big problem also in the West, is that we're needing to recognize we need to invest in our mental health in order to be able to, be balanced on the planet.
Agreed. And that ties in back with what Fran said about we need a mindset shift. I've always said it's very important that we finally, especially in the spiritual community, not try to ascend, because that's when we then enter the whole realm of like blessing the cacao and everything else, that all the shit stuff that went on before that happening, right? Before that blessing is then doesn't matter anymore, because we ascended beyond the physical. So we've come into, this is also the whole mental problems at the moment we are facing. It's becoming so out of touch with our bodies and our environment, and we are being too much in our heads, causing then us also so many problems that is then be covered up by what you say, all the external trinkets that distract us, but actually don't go to the core of things, because it's difficult, it's discomfort. I think we in the West really have to face discomfort. And when we then do this and this discomfort is very practical, right? It's the old spiritual masters will tell you, yes, they've been enlightened, but only to come back in their bodies and realize, I'm meant to be here on this planet, so I might as well do the best I can in this human body. So that means when we talk ceremonial grade cacao, ceremonial being a spiritual practice, it will come back down to bringing that on this earth and on this planet, making sure the people are thriving, the land is thriving, nature is thriving, our connection and love over everything, I would say, right? And this is then, when you face discomfort in terms of practicality, such as, having to spend more money. Same for the cacao producers, right? They will not be able to make such a high-end profit that, the classic business market will love to see, and they will be proud for it, right? They will be like, I am proud that my brand X, Y, and Z is not making the huge profits because we're ceremonial grade and we establish the farmers get paid properly and and then there is, like you said, there's transparency because there's pride about this, and not like, no, I'm not going to tell you because it's just, whatever, it doesn't matter. there won't be, that's discomfort. That's actually avoiding discomfort, I would say.
I mean, also with ceremonial-grade cacao, there just isn't that much. I mean, nature just doesn't produce thousands and thousands and thousands of tons of cacao. Just, it doesn't. Ceremonial-grade cacao, I mean, our association can produce about a ton a month, which is 12 tons a year, which is nothing. It's minimal compared to what, you know, the major commoditizers are doing. So, you know, and that's because you've got little, you know, small holdings with only about, you know, 3 hectares or 2 hectares. So that's the reality of it. There just isn't that much cacao around, pure ceremonial grade. You know, it's not a commodity. It's a medicine. I mean, that is what it is. Ceremonial grade cacao is medicinal, and therefore it can't be. You can't have tons and tons of it. It's a very limited amount. So anyone that's bringing pallets in of cacao, it has to be GMO, or there has to be GMO in it. There's just, you know, nature only produces a certain amount of cacao, and if the harvests fail, or you know, the rains fail, and like I was saying, that nature, climate's really an important part of this, then their ceremonial grade cacao won't be produced. I mean, that is the bottom line of it.
And I just want to mention something here, because this is, you know, if we're looking at people in land, people and people, and this harmonious way of living, it's the same with the association that we work with in Bali, where it is wildly grown and harvested, and so much respect in the lands, like Rebekah's mentioning in Ecuador, and like where Laura also recommends getting cacao from. And when the cacao is not producing the fruit, so they can't actually work with ceremonial grade cacao to support their families, there are other trees on that land. They go and they harvest the coconuts, then they go and they harvest the papayas, the bananas, or the cinnamon, whatever it is, because it's a diverse ecosystem. So they're not relying on one crop for their income to sustain the family. And so it just works for them. They don't need to go and clear land and just create monoculture of one crop. So there is going to be a limited amount available. And the problem is when the big companies come in and say, we'll give you a lot more money if you clear all your land and start to just plant this seed. Here it is, it's a cheap one, it's GMO'd. And that's been happening with other crops for many years already. So we're trying to avoid that. So it is to see this as, like Rebekah says, as a medicine that we are going to be paying more for, because we are supporting a great process all around where people are still getting a lot out of it. There's a vitality there, as well as people and land, and the whole idea that we are still part of nature, and the respect and the harmony that goes along with that. I don't know if that was leading me into a question, but I'm going to check. Laura, did you have another question? I think I just wanted to deter what is
my
being said.
battery is most likely going to die soon. So just one last thing, and then in case I'm off, then that's the reason why. So I want to say thank you to Rebekah already for coming to see us here. What I think also is important to really stretch this here about, there is only a limited amount. So what I think we should learn now as a consumer, and that's something, you know, I'm telling you a secret here. Okay. So we're all training cacao people, right, out there. So Rebekah has a training, which is a very like in-depth, intense retreat. And then we've got Fran with her training, and I have a training that is more like a variety of overview things. But what I always start this with a little surprise for my students, and it is saying your first task is to not drink cacao for at least 1 or 2 weeks. Yeah, so that's like the one thing I start with, because I want people, and this is obviously people that are new to cacao, they start with a dieta, and then they get the idea of cacao, and then they break, because otherwise they're like, yeah, I'm not drinking cacao anyway. So it has obviously the challenge, but it's mostly the challenge for those that are already used to it. For people to realize why they're drinking it, and when there's a habit that's being formed, right? And I think as a consumer now, especially with it becoming more limited in a way, if we want to avoid certain certain things like GMO cacao, it will come down to our responsibility of consuming it very respectfully. And that doesn't mean that we can't consume cacao regularly if if it's possible for us, and especially if we're using it medicinally for a certain cause, let's say mental illness, but the cause still should be to heal ourselves. And cacao reminds us of this all the time. It's like, come back within yourself. You have the healing powers. So she always tells us, rely on yourself above all else. So the core reasons for us should be to get to that point, right? And so not just continue to consume cacao to, you know, use it as another beautiful thing that you want, or to like help discomfort, but to actually face discomfort. And once we are integrated into that, I think that from my own experience, and I bet you know this too, suddenly there's a phase where you just don't want to, or just don't think about drinking cacao because that lesson has been integrated. Have you experienced that?
Oh yeah, I know loads of people that that have experienced that drink it for a time and then can't drink it anymore and need a natural break from it. I mean, that's why we call it ritual cacao, because my whole thing is ritually, not habitually. When you do something ritually, if you give it an intention, if you sit with cacao, and that I've been teaching this since I started this whole journey. You know, the whole point about cacao is that it is a medicine. So you need to give it that space, that time to that's why we don't have like cacao espresso, because then you're just shutting it down. And you know, it's not a commodity. This is about sitting with cacao in the morning, giving yourself that 15 minutes to just take a moment, set your intentions. Good mental health. The whole thing about, for me, is around mental health. It's around, you know, people working with cacao alongside a daily practice is part, for me, of a daily practice. So when someone says, what do you do for your well-being? People say, oh, I go cold water swimming, or I do mindfulness, or I do meditation, or, you know, I do breath work. I drink cacao. It is part of a wider usage of a well-being practice. But when you drink cacao in the morning and you give it that 15 minutes to set your intentions, set your flow, get ready, have those 15-20 minutes of silence to really tune into the cacao, your day flows much easier. It's way more. If you're drinking cacao mindlessly, it doesn't have the same effect as if you're doing it consciously. And that's the difference. It will still have the physiological effect, but you won't have that really deep awareness, I like to call the shamanic effect, that cacao can offer when you drink it in a ritualized way, which doesn't mean you can't do it every day. It just means that you're not doing it habitually, like, as you know, mindless. It's with real
yeah, thank you. So Rebekah, what we like to do at the end of these chat series is just to kind of contextualize and summarize, but we've chatted about so much. So I'm going to leave that part, but just to give those that are listening a few questions that they can go and ask their supplier or cacao practitioner that they may be doing ceremonies with or having sessions with, so that they're a little bit more empowered just to go find out if it is actually ceremonial grade cacao that they are being served or being sold. So along the lines of farming practices, are there a few questions that you could help us ask our supplier or practitioner?
Brilliant question, because there are people who are serving cacao powder in cacao ceremonies. So if someone's selling cacao powder, don't drink it. Just don't drink it, because the problem with cacao powder is that it's had the cacao butter removed, which means the spirit of cacao is no longer in that cacao powder. And if you're working with cacao as a plant medicine spirit, then ceremonial grade cacao is the only cacao that really serves that spirit, that you can communicate with the spirit. The reason why shamans only grow their own medicines and work with their own medicines and know where their medicines are coming from, because they work directly with the spirit of cacao. If that medicine's been abused, if that cacao's been abused, if that if it hasn't been grown properly, then you can't communicate with the spirit. The spirit has to be pure in order to communicate with it. So someone who's really working with cacao as a plant medicine spirit is working directly with the spirit, is communicating in the language of the spirit, which is why it is so important that your cacao, if you're doing it properly as a plant medicine shaman, or doing it properly as a plant medicine ceremony, then it has to be pure cacao. So first thing, no cacao powder, no chocolate powder. Absolutely not. Second, no GMO. That is my biggest thing, is no, if it's GMO, you know, then if it's coming, for example, from a place that they've got thousands of farmers where they're selling other commodities, chances are it's just another commodity, you know, to sell on the market. The ceremonial cacao is not a marketplace commodity. You have to go out and find it. You have to do your research. You have to know what you have to find these communities in order to be able to claim it's ceremonial grade. So I would definitely ask, and if they're not transparent and they don't know, then they're not doing ceremony. They're not doing ceremony. Then the ceremony is just made up trendy bullshit, basically toxic spirituality. Because a real shaman or someone who's really doing a plant medicine will definitely 100% know exactly what's in their medicine, know where their medicine's from, because they have to communicate with the spirit of the medicine. If you don't know where your medicine is from and you don't know, where it's grown, and you have no idea, then you're not communicating with them. You're just serving it as a cup of cacao. Something very, very different. I also want to make another point here around what is a ceremony, because there's a lot of people who are using cacao with gong or with breath or with ecstatic dance. I'm sorry, but that isn't a ceremony. That is cacao and sacred dance. That is cacao and ecstatic dance. That is cacao and gong. If you are going to a cacao ceremony, it's working with the spirit of cacao. You are speaking to cacao and hearing what she is saying to you. The person who is serving the cacao, the shaman that's serving the cacao, is enabling you to hear what the messages cacao has for you directly. So anyone that is saying that they're doing a 1.5 hour ceremony with gong, it's not a real ceremony. And also we need to be very clear what a ceremony actually is, because it takes hours for a proper cacao ceremony. My cacao ceremony is a 4.5 hours, which is why if you come on my training, it's an 8-day residential training, because in order to be able to communicate with the spirit of cacao at that level, you have to dive deep into the understanding of what cacao is. And what I'm seeing is that a lot of people are going to the tip and not even knowing that there's a huge unknown underneath of the iceberg, and they just know the tip of cacao, because cacao is quite a subtle medicine. So physiologically you're going to get that physiological, but if you want to get the real life-changing transformational experience from cacao, then you really need to take her much, much, much deeper. And because I've had this background in ayahuasca and plant medicines for 25 years, I know how to dive below the surface. And that is why my trainings are 8 days, because in order to go way, way deep, deep down into the darkness, into the darkness of cacao, you need to be able to be taken down there to understand her power. So a ceremony is only a ceremony when you are directly communicating with the spirit of cacao.
Thank you, Rebekah. I want to emphasize here on the importance of the duration, because even though this is intense, 8 days, still Rebekah is in touch with her cacaoistas beyond this, because my training, for example, is a year, and I wouldn't do it below, because even if I do it shorter, then at least I'd be in touch with them. And I know Rebekah is, because the thing is, we dive in with cacao, and yes, excitement, now I'm going to hold space, blah, 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 blah. And then half a year, 2 years down the line, I've got students that come back from me from like 4 years ago, suddenly the big realization hits. Or, oh my gosh, you shift, you pivot, and there's new people in ceremony, and they have new questions. And suddenly the integration of it, also in your day-to-day life, you become a mother, and the relationship with cacao changes, whatever, right? All these things. So making sure also, if you choose a mentor, you have someone that, accompanies you. And also, even just having a mentor, like, another thing that often people don't underestimate when working with cacao, because cacao is such a beautiful plant. She's been around as chocolate. We are so in tune with her in a way, and, she's very joyful. So, but that is one thing. The other thing is, like Rebekah said, working with her in ceremony. We're entering a complete different field here, especially then also when we claim to heal, right? In that sense. So
exactly.
Thank you very much. And it comes down again to customer discernment, because cacao powder is easy to depict, right? So, okay, we clearly see that. We're like, yeah, cacao powder, no. But nowadays, you can see in the health food store, you can see blocks of cacao as well. And marketing gets very, very tricky. So they have these blocks of cacao that are way too cheap to be ceremonial-grade cacao, but they're marketed so pretty and so beautiful, and they have the right words, and it's like exactly like, there's a cool dragon on it, for example, or like a fancy jaguar, or like a beautiful butterfly that just speaks to your heart. And you're like, I want this cacao. You know how this works. Like, we've all been there as teenagers where we wanted that shampoo because it was in the adverts, not thinking about what kind of chemicals are in there, and really knowing that just washing our hair with water and a bit of soap would probably do the same trick. But no, we wanted this cool thing, right? Same with cacao. So it really comes back to us to realize, again, facing the discomfort of maybe also having to say no to something that we so want. But being honest, like, is this really the real shit? Maybe ask. Not maybe, actually go ask. And we do emphasize this at the end of every call. Yeah.
You do your research. I mean, the research out there, if you find something and you see it and you should do your research. I mean, there's so many cacao companies out there now, and everyone will be different. Everyone will have a different vibration.
And
it's about preference. It's just preference. Again, down.
That actually is a question that came through. Thank you. Just we were pausing on the questions until this point. So one of the questions that came through now is, can we recommend an ethical cacao brand, one that is safe? Personally, I prefer not to say any names just on this live because there are so many. It depends where that person is based, if they can like afford, you know, to source from their country direct, need to import. So basically, just go and do some research. Go to that company or that supplier's website and just do a quick Google search on Instagram as well. Do a quick search. Go check out their link and just see what information is available just to the front user on their website or their Instagram page, and then pop them a message on their contacts page if it's a website, or on their Instagram DMs, and just see, because now we've put some questions here at the end of this live. I'll put them in the comments, in the content, whatever it's called. Captions. I'll put the questions here, and this is going to be specifically around farming practices. And if you just go back onto myself and Laura's pages, then you will see the part 3, part 2, and part 1. And in each of those, we've just got a few questions. We didn't want to overwhelm you by sitting through a 5-hour live with us. We've like broken it down just to smaller topics. Today we have Rebekah, and we're so grateful for that. So Rebekah, we'll also share this so you can maybe put it up on your feed if you want. And then just ask us as well. You can ask us maybe just after this live in a bit more of a private manner, because there are lots out there that are doing great work, but there are also a lot out there that are charlatans and or just don't know. And that's the whole point of us coming together and have these conversations, to spread the awareness and for all of us to learn together in this space. So ask questions, just like we've all been saying. Ask questions, ask questions. And if there's a little bit of a red flag or lack of transparency, someone's not able to answer the question, then maybe you can also educate them kindly and just say, hey, there's this question I have. If you can't answer it, maybe we can find out together. You know, that's the ideal situation, or hand in hand to the sunset. That might not be the reality, how you're going to be met with a question, but nonetheless, this is life, and we're going to hit a few bumpy patches along the road.
Yeah,
but it's important that we educate ourselves.
Direct around plant medicine shamanism, please do. Rebekah at RebekahShaman.com. Yeah, just if you've got any questions, just let me know.
And be aware that everyone, not everyone, actually not everyone, but most will say, this is the best cacao. Mine is the best cacao. And it's really rare. I only know of one person that doesn't do this. So, because it's a marketing thing, but we now hopefully gave you enough of a context for you to know that there's differences out there, and that you can choose the one that feels aligned with you when the standards are met. So don't trust the big first line, because everyone has that. It's just a thing in this world. But you can't anymore trust any words until we've hopefully gone as far as at least establishing the certain ceremonial-grade cacao stamp. But so far we're not there yet. So
trust the taste, trust the energy, trust the vibration. That's really your intuition.
Yeah. Cool.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. It's lovely to meet and connect with you and talk about cacao. And we're coming together now more as a collaboration of an industry, and I think that's really important as well. Yes. There's enough cacao for everybody, so it's really important that the industry also has more of a collaboration to be able to protect ceremonial grade cacao as we head into the mainstream, as it heads more into a mainstream, becomes a fad trend, and so that we can protect cacao and make sure it remains a medicine. Anyway, ladies, I'm going to have to go.
So, dogs and court.
Thank you so much. Sending you all those. Bye-bye.
Much love. Thank you, everyone. Laura, do you have any final words to share?
Yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for being on here so long. I know it was way longer than we usually have our calls, but I think it was well worth it.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week. Mwah, much love. Bye.